Roll call working Tuesday, September 11. Color for the day is green. As always, protect yourselves, watch each other's backs.
We have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
Prepared for everything. Not this. Not for something this size. There's no plan. Okay, listen up. We gotta evacuate the tower. Who's coming? Step forward.
I got it, Sarge.
I'll go. Sarge. All right. Follow me. Stay together. You still see the light?
Yeah!
Hello and welcome to The Complete Works, an in-depth look into the career and filmography of Nicolas Cage. My name is Mike Smith. Joining me on this journey into the depths of true Cagedom is my friend, co-host, and fellow Cageaholic,
Mike DeCriscio.
How you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing good. I was originally nervous for what your intro was going to be, but I remembered that's the other podcast where you do a bit at the beginning.
Where I do like a goofy intro at every...
Yeah, I was a little scared about what this one was going to be.
Yeah,
but,
that would not be appropriate for this review, I don't think, Mike.
Probably not.
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about the movie World Trade Center today, and I don't think we really need to go in depth about the events of 9/11.
Probably not, but Mike, if there's any podcast that would do it, it's probably not this one, though.
Yeah, absolutely not. And that's something that pretty much everyone already knows about anyway, right? It's you know, that was such a huge historical event that happened. We were both pretty young when it happened. I was 8 years old. I think you were probably like 9 or 10. So I remember it kind of like I remember it happening, but I was too young to understand it at the time.
Yeah.
But I do, however, want to talk about 9/11 in the context of the entertainment industry and the film industry because that's what this podcast is actually about.
I've heard that.
Yeah. I'm a little familiar with that concept. We have done 46 episodes up to this point.
Jesus Christ.
So, Mike, after September 11, 2001, pretty much everything in the country sort of just stopped for a while. And that includes culture. You know, movies were delayed from their release dates, and the ones that did open weren't particularly well received or underperformed at the box office. The most famous example is probably Zoolander. Which opened 2 weeks after 9/11 and kind of severely underperformed. Even Roger Ebert noted in his review that it was probably a victim of bad timing.
Wow!
Because he gave it 1 star, and that movie didn't get a great critical reaction at the time. And Ben Stiller was such a huge star, so it should have made more money, but it just didn't because people just weren't in the mood to go see this goofy Ben Stiller movie.
A dumb, goofy comedy. Yeah.
So there was a gradual build up to people being able to enjoy art again over the next few months. To me, it was the season premiere of Saturday Night Live that year. Which kind of signaled that the world would keep spinning, in which Paul Simon performed and Rudy Giuliani and members of the New York Fire Department appeared to encourage New York to carry on. There's always that great moment, actually, in there where Lorne Michaels asks, "Can we be funny?" And Giuliani responds, "Why start now?" Like that. It was nice. It was kind of a nice tribute to New York, kind of moving past this dark chapter. But whenever there is an earth-shattering event in history, it's inevitable that there will be movies about it. And then for a few years after 9/11, though, movie studios kind of stayed away. Perhaps because the wound was still kind of fresh, possibly out of respect. The only example I can think of before 2006, which was this year that we're talking about right now, was the Michael Moore documentary Fahrenheit 9/11, which was 2004. Right. But in terms of narrative film, 2006 sort of opened the door for that date to be portrayed in film, for it was the year that not one, but two movies based on events from that day were released in theaters. So the one that we're not covering today is United 93, which is a movie directed by Paul Greengrass, best known for his work on the Bourne Identity movies. Actually, not the Bourne Identity, but the Bourne Supremacy and Bourne Ultimatum. That was him. So the Bourne movies, let's say. And that depicts the events of Flight 93 leading up to the crash in Pennsylvania. And that is a really terrific movie. Have you seen United 93, Mike?
I actually have not seen that.
Okay,
no.
That's a really good movie. Greengrass is, Greengrass has that documentary style of filmmaking, that kind of shaky cam, and that doesn't really always work for me in his blockbuster stuff. But when he does stuff like United 93 or Captain Phillips, I think it really helps sell the intensity because he's portraying a real event as if it's happening right there. It makes you feel like you're watching something as it's going down.
Right.
And that film landed on more top 10 lists than almost any other movie that year, and got Greengrass an Oscar nomination for Best Director.
Wow.
Today, we are talking about the other 9/11 movie that opened in 2006, which received a lot less critical acclaim than United 93 did. We are talking World Trade Center, which is a movie which depicts the attack in New York City from the perspective of an ensemble cast, but mainly focused on two Port Authority police officers who get trapped underneath the rubble of the World Trade Center. And the movie was directed by Oliver Stone, a filmmaker whose work I always feel like I should like, but I feel like I very rarely connect with it, at least for me. Are you a fan of Oliver Stone, Mike?
I think it's kind of a similar situation as you, where in theory, yes, but I also don't really know.
Yeah, there are a couple of decent movies in there, but there's movies that's like, I watched Wall Street and wasn't really a fan. I've watched Platoon a couple of times and just have not connected to it for whatever reason, and I don't know. It seems like I would like it,
Yeah.
But yeah, he has such a long filmography, and there's good stuff. I do like JFK. I think JFK is a good movie, and there's stuff like that. But even like something like Natural Born Killers, which seems like it should be right up my alley. It's a story based on a story from Quentin Tarantino, but I don't know. Just Oliver Stone's very kinetic direction of that movie. It just doesn't really work for me, except for the Robert Downey Jr. bits at the end. Because I remember that being pretty good. But Oliver Stone is no stranger to controversy, especially when he takes on a political story. And he has made 3 different films about presidents, JFK, Nixon, and W. Just recently did a movie about Edward Snowden that came out last year, which coincidentally also happens to feature Nicolas Cage. So one day
preview for 4 years from now.
One day we will talk about that movie. I was thinking about going to see that movie in theaters. But I wasn't I didn't really care about it that much, and I was like, I'm going to have to watch it eventually for the podcast, so I might as well just put it off.
There you go.
As long as possible. And even this past summer, in terms of Oliver Stone controversy, he came out with a 4-part documentary TV series called The Putin Interviews, in which he interviews Vladimir Putin. And in the lead up to the press, doing the press for that show, he made some kind of controversial remarks, sort of in support of Vladimir Putin.
Or just straight up in support of Putin.
Yeah, he's basically a certified crazy person, Oliver Stone. Let's say that. He's a radicalist, and he's occasionally an interesting filmmaker, but not one that I'm totally the biggest fan of. But with World Trade Center, I think Stone was trying to avoid politics as much as possible, despite being a pretty vocal critic of George W. Bush at the time the movie was made. Before the film's release, many thought the movie would follow the lead of his movie JFK and indulge in a whole lot of 9/11 conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Which
Did you know that Cage screams can melt steel beams?
God damn it, Mike. We're trying to push this podcast through with respect.
I have made a mistake.
That's not us. Anyway, instead, what Stone did, he went the opposite direction and set out to make a movie simply about the heroism and the sadness of the day with little to no political themes. Still, the movie did end up courting some controversy. I actually remember seeing news reports about this movie around the time it came out that kind of questioned the ethics of using real footage of the 9/11 attacks during the movie, which it does. There's actual footage of the attack happening. But more than that, Stone and the producers of the film were accused of rejecting the families of several people who were involved in the events who wanted to provide their story to the movie. So the 2 cops, John McLaughlin and Will Jimino, were a part of the film's production from the beginning. And the ESU police depicted in the movie, Scott Strauss and Patty McGee, they were actually on set as technical advisors. But Jeanette Pizzullo, who's the widow of Don Pizzullo, who's played by Jay Hernandez in the movie, really lashed out at the movie and criticized McLaughlin and Jimino for participating in it. And Jamie Amoroso, whose husband is played by John Bernthal in this movie, felt the same way. So the families of this, a lot of the families of the victims of this that are depicted in this movie, were very upset at the movie's release.
That's kind of interesting. And I wonder if they felt it was wrong, I don't know, or depicted things incorrectly, or did disservice to them. I don't know.
I think that is part of it. I think some of them just didn't want to relive the memory of them that way. And there were other groups in support of it, like at the premiere of the movie, the New York Fire Department and the New York Police Department were there, like in support and all that. I think Rudy Giuliani attended the premiere of the movie and stuff like that. But there were people who were involved in the actual events who were upset at the movie's making. But in any case, Nicolas Cage leads the ensemble cast of World Trade Center, playing John McLaughlin, one of the cops stuck in the rubble. And the other cop, Will Jimino, is played by Michael Pena, who last appeared with Nicolas Cage in a bit role in Gone in 60 Seconds.
That's right.
Yeah, so how far he has come. Like this is we kind of charted a very early Michael Pena role to him being the lead in an Oliver Stone movie, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. That's true.
So that's neat. And then from there, Maria Bello plays Cage's wife, Donna McLaughlin, and this was peak Maria Bello. This was the year after she was in History of Violence and Thank You for Smoking. She was kind of everywhere for 2 years.
Yeah.
So that's cool. And then Maggie Gyllenhaal is in this movie playing Pena's wife, Allison Jimino, and that's another Cage reunion because she also had a small role in Adaptation, if you'll recall correctly. She was
That's correct.
Donald Kaufman's girlfriend in that movie. Stephen Dorff from Blade plays...
I thought that was him. All right.
Plays Scott Strauss, and John Bernthal, one of the best actors working today, in my opinion, known for The Walking Dead and, of course, playing the Punisher on Daredevil, plays Christopher Amoroso. And Jay Hernandez, recently seen as El Diablo in Suicide Squad, plays Dominic Pizzullo. And then from there, Michael Shannon appears as Dave Carnes, a Marine who takes it upon himself to help out at the World Trade Center. Also, the real Dave Carnes was upset by his portrayal in this film as well. Just throwing that out there.
That seems...
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we'll talk about his character in a bit, but it's very simplistically drawn. I feel like, in terms of what this movie's going for. And then Donna Murphy, who played Doc Ock's wife in Spider-Man 2, plays Judy Jonas, as we have mentioned a few times. Spider-Man 2, greatest movie ever made. Frank Whaley, who appears in several Oliver Stone movies, but is probably best known as Brett from Pulp Fiction, plays paramedic Chuck Sirica. I see you just gave that head nod of approval, oh shit.
That's right.
That's Brett. And then Danny Nucci, who is Jack's best friend from Titanic and who appeared with Nicolas Cage in The Rock, plays Officer Giraldi. William Mapother, the cousin of Tom Cruise, who's also known for his role on Lost, but mostly being the cousin of Tom Cruise, plays the other Marine, Sergeant Jason Thomas. Armando Riesco, who was an FBI agent in another Nicolas Cage movie, National Treasure. There's a lot of Cage reunions going on in World Trade Center.
Yeah, this is we're hitting the 6 degrees of Nicolas Cage point.
Yes. He plays Antonio Rodriguez in this movie. Screenwriter Nick D'Amici, known for co-writing movies directed by Jim Mickle, like Stakeland and We Are What We Are, plays Lieutenant Casamitis in this movie. Arthur J. Nascarella, who was in Bringing Out the Dead, plays the chief of the New York Fire Department. And finally, in a scene towards the end, none other than Viola Davis appears as a mother in the hospital, waiting to hear news about her son. So that's kind of a one-and-done scene. I feel like that was right before Viola Davis broke out pretty big.
Yeah, it was definitely... At least it appeared to be a role for someone that hadn't gotten to what she's at now.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird. It's a meaty role for that one scene, so it seems like it's kind of a mid. It's not like she was just some random actress picked up off the street.
Yeah.
I think they absolutely knew that she was a good actress, so it's kind of like an on the rise Viola Davis in this movie, which is kind of interesting. So World Trade Center was directed by Oliver Stone 2 years after his previous film Alexander, and 2 years before his next film, which was W. It was written by Andrea Berloff, who went on to co-write Straight Outta Compton in 2015. So that was a pretty big hit for her. And then the movie made about $163 million against a budget of about $65 million. So it did pretty well at the box office. And if you went to a theater that weekend in August 2006, you may have also seen Pulse, which is a horror movie starring Kristen Bell, co-written by Wes Craven. I see a nod of recognition there as well from you.
Yeah, that sounds familiar, yeah.
You could have seen Zoom, which is a family superhero movie starring Tim Allen, Courtney Cox, and Chevy Chase. Or you could have seen Step Up, the first in what would become a long-running dance film series featuring Channing Tatum and Jenna Dewan, which is, of course, where they met, and they are married now, so that's neat.
Wow.
You could have seen a part of history, Hollywood history right there.
Could have been there when it all started.
Yes. So the IMDb plot synopsis for World Trade Center reads, 2 Port Authority police officers become trapped under the rubble of the World Trade Center. So, Mike, with that all out of the way, what are your overall thoughts on World Trade Center?
Oh, man. So my thoughts on World Trade Center is that it is definitely a kind of interesting cultural artifact, I feel. Like, that kind of whole, what you were talking about, how 2006 seemed to be the year that we were kind of, people were finally ready to talk about what happened or kind of confront those feelings, that we had 2 movies about 9/11 in the same year. That said, I don't think this is a very great movie.
I'm with you.
Yeah, we have the kind of, I don't know if I want to call it prologue, first act, whatever you want to call it. But within about 20 minutes or so, the towers have collapsed already, and our main characters are trapped under the rubble.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is spent in flashbacks and moments they're having together, dealing with their families, dealing with this confronting death. So it does have these kind of emotional or sentimental moments that I feel do have some impact. But for the most part, it's kind of just it's just like a fluffy, kind of overacted. My note is that everyone feels like they're acting in a soap opera despite being in a movie about 9/11.
Yeah.
But what else could I expect, I guess, from a movie that came out 5 years after this kind of event, right? We're not going to get some hard-hitting, biting, confronting, dark thoughts or anything like that from this kind of movie.
Yeah.
But that's just kind of my reaction to it now, I guess, this far removed in looking at it in 2017. It just feels kind of like light and silly in a way that doesn't exactly feel appropriate in some ways. I don't know.
I could see where you're coming from. I remember I saw this movie when it came out in theaters. And I remember I was probably like 13 at the time. I would have been about 13. And I remember being pretty affected by it then. But watching it now, I hadn't seen it since then. And watching it now, I think this is a really well-intentioned film. That falls just a little bit flat. It just doesn't really work. It works on some level. I think it does work in general. I think I basically like it. But it does, I don't know, there is a lot of problems with it. I think the first half hour or so, which depicts the chaos and the confusion before the buildings fell, is actually pretty strong.
Yes. I do agree with that. Yeah.
Pretty good. And then once it becomes the story of 2 men trapped, unable to move underneath, that's a really fascinating story. I don't know if it's a particularly cinematic one. And that's kind of the thing. I feel like there's ways you can shoot that. There's ways you can make that story work. I've seen movies with people trapped in one location, unable to move, something like that. Something like Ryan Reynolds in Buried would be a decent example of that. And that's a movie that is a lot shorter, it's like 80 minutes, and it uses every camera angle you could possibly think of. And this, for the majority of the runtime, it's just Nicolas Cage and Michael Pena trapped under the rubble, and there's not much to that visually that you can do. It's even shot, I think, in a particularly dark way, which again, obviously it would be dark, but it doesn't see you can't see much when you're watching them, and so you're just kind of watching this darkened screen and occasionally hearing Nicolas Cage scream. That's kind of
I think there are definitely shots that are just shots of rubble. And we just have them talking over it, and they're not visible in either part, or any part of the frame. And what is visible, like you said, it's just kind of darkened screen.
Yeah.
But I think I wondered if it had been more interesting if we were able to spend more time with these characters before this event. Because we like we said in the first half hour or so, the event, 9/11, the attacks have happened, and we're in the rubble. And a lot of our emotional impact or our emotional connection is built up over the next hour and a half. So I wonder if it had done the other way around, where we were able to spend time with these characters going through their daily lives and stuff like that, rather than seeing it through flashbacks and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we're introduced to a lot of characters really quickly, who are then just as quickly dispatched, just to focus on the 2 main characters, McLaughlin and Jimeno. And I think there is some value to the complaints that it doesn't provide enough focus on the stories of the other people involved, like some of the people who were upset about this movie being made, who were upset about their depiction in the movie. I think there is some merit to that, because the movie does kind of just focus on those two characters and their families, and then it kind of provides like a cursory overview of pretty much everybody else who was involved with this, and there was a lot of people involved.
Yeah, and all the other people in their unit are just a guy from New York that's also a cop. That's everybody's character for the first hour.
But yeah,
that was all.
Just wanted to bust out your New York accent.
That's all I wanted.
But yeah, but I think part of what I do like about this is that Stone does fashion the movie as more of an ensemble piece. So even though you are spending most of the time, with Nicolas Cage and Michael Pena trapped, like you probably spend a good third of the movie just doing that. But you're also spending time watching Nicolas Cage's wife, and you're spending time watching Michael Pena's wife. And I think it's actually best when it's focusing on their wives, wondering whether their husbands are going to make it home or not. Because I think there's a lot of tension there. There's a lot of drama going on there. In particular, I think Maggie Gyllenhaal is terrific in this movie. Like, I think she's MVP all the way. I feel like the other actors, like there's some good acting going on. There is some overacting going on, some overdramatic acting going on. But I think Maggie Gyllenhaal is terrific, and Viola Davis at the end has she's really good in her monologue. Yeah,
I definitely agree that the family portions of the film are more interesting. I don't know how to phrase that without sounding like an asshole, I guess. But I think there's more going on. There's more stuff to be engaged with in those portions of the film.
Yeah, but still, I think just by virtue of the subject matter and the imagery that it's playing with, I think the film does still have at least some emotional impact. Like it still kind of like works on a base level for me, even though like a lot of it doesn't work. Like I feel like there. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, just because it gets a bit of a pass.
Yeah, just because of the story that it is telling, I feel like it's not that it gets a pass. It's just that it like. Just by nature of the material that it's working with, I feel like it like almost works, and I think there is like it does create an emotional response in any case. At the very least, I think it does work as a companion piece to a United 93, which again is a really good movie. Like United 93 is really great. That's a movie with Paul Greengrass directed that, and it's a cast of basically unknowns. So there's no like movie stars in the roles, and it's about like the passengers kind of taking over the plane and retaking it from the people who are hijacking it and sacrificing themselves. And it's a really powerful story, and that's a really good movie. That's much better than World Trade Center. But it does. Right. It is like this is a solid companion piece to that one because it depicts those events from two different perspectives, essentially.
I did think that was also some of the most interesting moments. I think in World Trade Center where we are viewing the kind of people, like there's a particular montage where we kind of go around the world and see everyone watching the news and like just that, which I think was part of the archive footage. It seemed
might have been.
Yes. News broadcasts of all from around the world of all this stuff.
Yeah,
and particularly I think you mentioned also the kind of confusion. There's that moment where John Bernthal's like, when they're in the concourse, and he says, like, Israel got nuked off the map, man. Like, there's just no one had any idea what was going on. Just that kind of confusion at the beginning was interesting. And then that's something I definitely kind of a feeling I can relate to, even though I was so young. I just remember, coming out of school and like being told what happened and having no idea really what happened. So like that definitely, I agree that kind of resurfaced those emotions and stuff like that. So it still has some, even though the film kind of falls flat in places, like you said, it still also manages to succeed at what it's trying to do, I think. Yeah. And having this kind of a heroic, the heroism of humanity kind of thing. Message at the end.
Yeah, exactly. So now Nicolas Cage plays McLaughlin in the movie. What did you think of his performance in the movie, Mike?
Oh, Nicolas Cage. I mean, for a character that is buried under rubble for 98% of the movie, I think he does a surprisingly effective job. He still somehow manages to work in a Cage freakout.
Yes.
Or a couple Cage freakouts. We get a return of the what accent is this game? Right. Where he's doing a weird Boston accent, I think. I don't know exactly what's happening.
It's definitely an attempt at a New York accent, I think.
Yeah, it's an attempt at a New York accent. So that was fun to have that come back.
I mean, I will say, I think for the first like half hour before he gets trapped in the rubble, I think this could have been like on the track to be one of Cage's best performances. up to that point.
Agree, actually.
Like, I think he's really good in that first half hour. Like, he's playing a senior officer in this movie, and there's like a great authority to that role that I feel like we haven't seen from him so far in other roles. And we'll talk about how this fits into other Cage roles in a second. But yeah, I just feel like this was like kind of a new dimension to Cage that we haven't really seen in the past. And if the story had gone differently, if his character didn't get trapped in the rubble, this could have been like an all-time Cage role. But that's not what happened. He does get trapped in the rubble, and I think he's still fine once that happens. But the performance gets a lot more broad, I think, when that goes down. There's, like I said, there's a lot more screaming. There's a lot, there's a lot more. It's just more overactory. Which normally I love from Cage, doesn't really seem to fit with what this movie is supposed to be.
Yeah, he seems to be trying to compensate for the fact that he's just laying on the ground for these scenes,
right?
By just going big. But that said, even the kind of flashback scenes when we're seeing him. I mean, it's a quick throwaway thing where he's hammering shingles on the roof and he hits his thumb, like just silly, like the kind of like everyman scene. But stuff like that, or when his wife shows him the positive pregnancy test, like those kind of scenes, he sells. It is interesting to see him play an older man, or kind of play his age. Whereas National Treasure, it's a year before this or 2 years before this, and he's big action star Cage. Yes. But in this, he's kind of middle-aged dude.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, he's like he's playing an older kind of character. And I think he does really well in it. I feel like you don't see. I feel like we haven't seen him play that before. I don't think you really see him play it that much in the future.
No,
so it's interesting to see.
Yeah, I think that would have been a very interesting path if his career had gone that way. Yeah. If he had just kind of moved into these kind of mentor, that kind of older man role, rather than just being a murder machine in every movie.
Yes. So, Mike, how do you think this role fits in with the roles that we've seen Cage play so far?
I mean, we were kind of talking about that anyway, but I think it's a combination of a restrained glimpse at what Cage could have done. Sure. But at times we get the like we said, we get the Cage freak out. We get all the regular crazy screaming Cage that we typically know and love so well. Yeah. But feels very odd.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think this does feel like a growth role for Nicolas Cage in some respects. Yeah. Like, he's growing as an actor, playing this role, at least in the first half hour. Like, we've seen him play cops and soldiers and Secret Service agents, but always someone who had a superior to answer to. And this time, he's the one giving orders. He's the senior officer, and he does a great job for that half hour that he gets to just be a cop doing his job. I think is really interesting. I also wanted to note, we have seen Nicolas Cage play a police officer in New York in a story based on true events once before. That was in It Could Happen to You. Very different movie, but slightly similar in that circumstances and nothing else. Now, Mike, are there any moments or scenes in World Trade Center that stood out to you?
I do want to point out one of the Cage freakouts.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly when it is, but there's a moment, they kind of have the Jimeno and McLaughlin have this, or McLaughlin or whatever, have this kind of, don't fall asleep is this refrain they have to each other, talking to each other constantly to stay awake. And there's a moment where Cage isn't responding. He's not responding to Michael Pena, and Pena says like, "Oh, you're not much of a talker, huh?" And Cage just out of nowhere shouts, "My knees are crushed together. That's why I'm not talking." And this like crazy,
like that over the top kind of Cage voice.
Yeah. Like that makes sense as a reaction in that moment. Like there's a version of that line reading that works.
Right.
But when you shout it the same way he shouts, "Have you ever been dragged onto the sidewalk and beaten until you've pissed blood?"
Which is it's the same Matchstick Men, if anybody
from Matchstick Men. Yeah. When you deliver it the same way you deliver that line, it feels real weird.
Yeah. No, I feel you.
That's kind of it.
Okay, that's the one scene that stood out to you.
No, actually, there's that scene stands out to me in a kind of silly, goofy Cage way.
Right.
There's a moment earlier in the film where Michael Pena is left in charge of the cart, and while the rest of his unit runs to get supplies from the parking garage or something like that. And there's these like weird like explosion sounds happening, and that was the eeriest shit going on in this movie, where I think just that kind of whole 15, 20, 30 minutes or so where the attack is happening and when we are following there's the mass hysteria and confusion that was that area in New York is really the best part of the movie. I mean, we've said it a couple times.
No, I agree. It really like helps. It really sells like the chaos and the confusion that was going on that day. Like the imagery that's going on. You see like a woman that's just covered in blood running through the street. You see like the person falling from the World Trade Center, and you see like all these different sites, and they're just happening like so fast, like one after the other kind of thing. So it's like it really just kind of puts you in that moment. Yeah, it also, oh man, I don't know. I do have mixed feelings about some of that. Like some of it felt like a checklist of iconic visuals that we saw from that day, right? Sure, yeah. Like all the paper in the air, the people falling and jumping from the buildings, like all this weird like stuff that, and because it is very rapid fire and we're kind of in this overacty part of the movie a little bit, from some of the less fleshed out characters, it, at the same time as being really intense and emotional, it also kind of feels cheap. I would say. I mean, I think Oliver Stone shoots this movie as if it is a disaster movie, like kind of something like Earthquake or Avalanche or something like that. Even to the point where it is like a big ensemble cast of like well-known actors and that kind of stuff. So it's sort of like made in the same respect as like 70s and 80s disaster movies. And this is probably a story that shouldn't be made in that kind of cheap exploitative way. No, definitely not. Yeah, but I will say the only moment that I explicitly remembered from when I saw the movie back in 2006 is when Michael Pena has a vision of Jesus, and I don't really remember why that was the moment that I remember. He's got a water bottle. He does have a water bottle. I think I just remember even then like being like, this is weird that they're showing me this kind of thing. And I get like this movie has like a sort of religious bent going towards it. And that makes sense. I mean, these characters are people, religious people, and so that makes sense. But it was just weird that it like showed you the vision of Jesus. I guess when I remember even thinking that when I saw it back when I was 13, and I remember thinking it this time. I was just like, this is probably don't need to be showing this. Like, if they could have had Michael Pena just seeing it and just having like describing the vision or something, I think that would have been good. Like that would have been interesting. Because I'm guessing, like his character or the guy whose character is based on Will Jimeno, probably described that vision to whoever the screenwriter who wrote Straight Outta Compton, Andrea something, and she put it in the movie. But it just feels like too much almost, like it is a odd departure from the other 2 hours of this movie. We get these 3 minutes of this moment. Yeah, it's like this weird, it's a very weird moment. But yeah, I do want to point out the portrayal of New York City at the beginning of the movie. Before anything goes down, because I think it is kind of interesting. It's very early in the morning. It's like 3 or 4 in the morning. And it's depicted a lot more quietly than we usually see the city depicted in movies and TV. Like, it's very serene. There's very few cars on the road. Everybody's, like, not talking. And I think it's interesting. And it's not really, I don't think it's totally accurate depiction of New York City at any time. I feel like there's probably a lull where it gets quiet like that. I guess so. But I think it's specifically made to be that quiet, so that it is like a drastic change from the chaos that we're going to see later on. There is that juxtaposition going on there, so I wanted to point that out because I thought that was interesting. I did also want to mention the scene where Nicolas Cage's brother and Maria Bello are in the car, and they find out Cage is alive, because I think that scene is fantastic. Like I think that like is straight up a really just great scene. Like the smile that breaks out on his brother's face. His brother's played by Wes Stevens. It's just completely infectious, and like it's just really like, I think it's a really emotional scene. And I do appreciate, it felt real the moment when we feel like that the information they're given is wrong, right? Like that just seems like, of course, that I don't know, that felt authentic to me that they were told the wrong thing. I don't know, that just is something that I did stand out to me, and I do appreciate that little detail, that upping the ante of more of some having more tension, even where they're told he walked out of the rubble. Oh no, he's still buried. And of course the Viola Davis monologue. Right. So yeah, Viola Davis plays a character whose son was at the World Trade Center working as an elevator operator, I think is what she says. Yes. Yeah. And so she is unsure about whether her son made it out alive or not. And she's at the hospital waiting, and she has a monologue about that. And it's a really powerful scene. and really well acted by Viola Davis. And this was, I think, when her breakout role was The Help, right? I feel like it was The Help.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so it was like 6-7 years before The Help came out, or 5 years before The Help came out, and then she kind of blew up after that. But this is kind of like a really cool early Viola Davis scene. If you're a fan of her work and you haven't seen World Trade Center, you only have to watch this one scene, so you can go on YouTube and watch it. But it's really, really good. So I wanted to mention that. We should talk about Michael Shannon's character a little bit.
Who plays,
what was his name? David Burke? Davis Burke?
David Carnes?
Carnes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he is sort of portrayed as like an intensely religious Terminator in this movie.
That's exactly what he is.
Which, to be fair, is sort of his character on Boardwalk Empire, but it's...
He's an intensely religious helpinator.
That's it.
That's definitely what it is.
Yeah. He will stop at nothing in this movie to get to the World Trade Center and help out however he can, and that's admirable, of course. Apparently the real guy did that, but the movie really just portrays him as like kind of a one-note character because he's just an intensely religious person. He's like a Deus Ex Machina almost. In a weird way. And he does get the one bit of social commentary when he tells people that the country is already at war as soon as it happens. Everybody else is like confused and like crying out and like not understanding what's going on, and he's the one who's just like, this country's already on a war kind of thing. So I think he's the one who gets that in. It kind of edges in that little political commentary in there, and even then at the end of the movie, he's talking on the phone. And he's like enlisting in the army. He's like, "Well, I'm going back to avenge this," and he that kind of totally undercut his whole character for me. Because there's the bit earlier, or the moment earlier when he when he kind of lies his way into Ground Zero, and he asks for a report from what's the situation from one of the firemen, and he tells him what happened or what's going on, and he just kind of looks to the cloud of debris. It's like God brought down a cloud of dust, and the guy or some weird shit, and the guy calls him a nutbag, which I thought was pretty funny. It's the most New York thing ever. Yes.
But I was okay with his weird one note, kind of just, I don't know, blind patriotism, blind something in that moment, right? His character so far, and I was okay with it. But then at the end, where he does kind of wistfully look off camera and say that someone's got to go avenge this, just totally took all the impact and punch out of what his character does, which is weird because it's a real person. Right,
but I feel like it's such a 2006 era line. That's a line. That is a line from a movie in which the time period it came out, and we were still in Afghanistan and Iraq. I mean, I guess we still are, but I mean...
We still are. Exactly.
But at that point, people were still
Was this before or after the mission accomplished speech?
I think this had to have been way after.
I don't even remember when that happened.
I want to say that was in 2003. That was
way... That sounds right.
I feel like that was way early. So this is we're still... George W. Bush was still president, and even though Oliver Stone was a vocal critic of George W. Bush, I feel like there was a long period of time where you kind of had to support the war almost. People hated you if you didn't, basically. Dixie Chicks lost their jobs kind of thing. Because of that. Yeah,
I feel like it's around year 10 of the war where you're allowed to stop being in support of it.
It was probably before then, but still. It was honestly probably around 2005, 2006, but... I feel like there was still a lot of people who would have been upset if there wasn't that character in this movie. And otherwise, I mean, anything else you wanted to mention about World Trade Center, Mike? I feel like we've kind of I've hit upon most of the stuff that I wanted to bring up. I did like that a lot of what Michael Pena and Cage talk about are just movies and TV shows. Those to keep themselves awake. Will Jimeno will just talk about do you ever see G.I. Jane? And he's talking about this one scene from G.I. Jane that really affected him. And
and Starsky and Hutch.
And all that stuff.
Singing the theme song and everything.
Yeah,
I agree. I think that was interesting. I do want to point out or bring up the scene. Is it John Bernthal? I do that every time I talk about him.
Yeah,
John Bernthal, or I don't remember exactly which one of the other members of their unit shoots himself when he's trapped.
Okay, we should actually talk about that because he doesn't shoot himself. But the movie makes it seem like he does, right?
And that's actually, they show him shoot his gun straight up, but then he dies. And I don't. It was very odd.
It makes it seem like he shoots himself, but he doesn't. I looked into that, and that's actually one of the people. That was Jay Hernandez's character. And his widow was one of the ones who was very upset about the movie being made, saying that it's disrespectful to her husband, disrespectful to his memory, and all that. And she criticized McLaughlin and Humano for even taking part, in helping make the movie and that kind of stuff. So the movie makes it seem like he actually killed himself. But I guess what actually happened, and I guess how it does happen in the movie, but the movie doesn't really make it clear, is that he's there and he's at that point he's trying to help Michael Pena move.
He's trying to move the slab off of Michael Pena's character.
Get him off that. But then everything shifts again, and he falls, and something hits him, and he gets a fatal injury essentially. And so he takes the gun and he shoots it one last time, and then he dies basically, and that's kind of how it's portrayed in the movie. That's how it's supposed to be portrayed in the movie. I think
that scene in Hot Fuzz where they asked, have you ever shot your gun in the air and gone,
I mean, I think the idea was that he would shoot the gun in the air and hopefully someone would hear it. That would be that makes sense. But the way the movie stages it and edits the scene, it makes it look like he shot himself. It's a very strange scene, and I thought he killed himself like that until I finished the movie and looked and was reading about it online. It's like, oh, that was an unclear scene for sure.
Definitely to look like he shoots himself.
Yeah, so that was very odd. But of the other cops, outside of Cage and Pena, was there any cast members that stood out to you? I did like seeing John Bernthal, just briefly.
Yeah, that was cool. That was
he's
interesting.
Also doing an exaggerated New York accent, but
yeah, he is.
But it's also kind of just the way he talks.
Right. I think it was interesting. It was an interesting exercise in terms of the podcast, because we've talked about scenes in these movies where it's like, oh, it's that guy. Like when we saw, oh shit, I forgot his name already. Oh man, that's embarrassing. Ron Swanson. Jesus Christ. Nick Offerman in Snake Eyes.
Yeah. Or City of Angels. That was
City of Angels. Yeah. Yes. The other movie that ends with construction men.
Oh yeah, weird.
But yeah, these kind of people popping up. This that's more equivalent of Viola Davis because it's before she was particularly famous,
right?
But I guess, and John Bernthal too. He wasn't particularly well known.
Yeah, this was a few years before Walking Dead, so this is before John Bernthal was the thing.
Really blew up. Yeah. But other than that, not really. They don't get a chance to do a whole lot.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, most of their characters have been killed by the time the towers actually fall. And the ones that aren't, they're not given enough screen time to really make that much of an impact, which is a bummer for sure. I think there is a potentially really good movie to be made out of this story, and I think that the movie that is made, it's good enough. It's solid. It's a little too long. It has pacing problems, and it's a kind of it takes kind of an uncinematic story and doesn't really do that much visually with it. And there are other movies that pay tribute to 9/11 in more interesting and more respectful ways. I mean, United 93, again, fantastic movie. It's a really great movie. Even The Walk, the Robert Zemeckis movie, which is about the Twin Towers, but it takes place in the 70s. It's not about 9/11. Even that has a really nice tribute to 9/11 at the end, a really powerful moment at the end of that movie. And I feel like nothing in this even comes close to the final few minutes of The Walk. It's
yeah.
But in any case, I think that about wraps up our discussion on World Trade Center, Mike. Unless you have any other final thoughts.
No, that's it. I think.
Yeah, it's fine. I think it's the movie that people may have needed at the time. Even though United 93 was the superior movie, I think United 93 was released first. Actually, I think back in the April of that year. But I think it was something that was important for 2006 to watch and to view. But watching it in 2017, it is outdated in some respects, and it has been outclassed by other movies that have depicted the same events. Yeah. In any case, I think we're going to skip Netflix reviews for this week because it feels just, I don't know, disrespectful or gross to laugh at people reviewing a movie about 9/11. It just seems weird.
Yeah. I'll gladly poke fun at it, but I don't want to hear anyone else poke fun at it.
Exactly, yeah. So, Mike, where can we find you online this week?
You can find me at twitter.com/mdfilmblog. And if you like Dungeons and Dragons, my friends and I post our games at youtube.com/GeoNerd79.
And you can find me online at twitter.com/msmithfilmblog and all of our podcasts and stuff at FilmBook.com. Thank you so much for listening to The Complete Works. I'm Mike Smith. That is Mike DeCriscio. If you're listening to this review via our podcast on iTunes, please subscribe to the podcast, rate it, take a moment to give us a review. You can help support this podcast and FilmBook by taking part in our Patreon campaign. You can find our Patreon campaign page at patreon.com/FilmBook. Now, any and all feedback, compliments, topic discussions, even hate mail can be sent directly to podcast@filmbook.com. Please list the podcast you're emailing about in the title of your email, because we produce just so many different ones, it's hard to keep track. We would love to hear from you. Now, join us in a couple of weeks. We don't know exactly when the next Complete Works will happen, because we're going to take a couple of weeks off so I can go to Comic-Con.
Yeah, Comic-Con's going to mess up all of our stuff.
It's going to mess up everything. But we are going to do a new Complete Works soon, and that one will be finishing out Nicolas Cage's 2006 with one of his most infamous films, Mike. It is time, finally, for The Wicker Man.
Bow, bow, bow.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited to finally dig into that one. That's it's one of the most famous Cage movies, and not in a good way, but like it's
yeah.
It's.
I actually have never seen it, so
I've never actually watched the whole thing from beginning to end. I've seen a lot of clips.
I've seen the Cage punching women supercut, but I've never seen.
I mean, how could you not? You know.
Yeah, come on.
It's going to be a really interesting discussion, I think. I actually just watched the original Wicker Man to prepare for this remake that I'm about to embark on.
We're supposed to prepare for this?
You don't have to watch it if you don't want to.
All right, that's all I was looking for.
But it's a good movie. The original is a good movie, and it's got Christopher Lee, which is always cool. Plus, you can keep an eye out for Film Bookcast for next week. We're talking about Kingsman: The Golden Circle. Now, I saw this last week. Mike, you haven't seen it yet. I enjoyed it. You know, it's solid. I don't think it's as good as the first one.
Much more a little colder than I was expecting.
I think it's solid. I don't think it's as good as the first one, but I think it is solid fun throughout. In any case, and I think you'll probably enjoy it too. So, thanks so much for listening, and thanks for getting in the cage.